Who are you? For most people, such a question calls for a simple, straightforward answer. For me, however, things have never been quite so cut and dried. I've always been bothered by the niggling awareness that there was much more to my identity than can be acquired, derived, achieved, qualified, quantified, and described. I grew up with no concrete facts or supporting evidence to verify my abstract notion of a larger, deeper, invisible identity, other than, of course, some religious or philosophical concepts I was taught about the soul. Over time, like most people, I soon became accustomed to acting out the prescribed scripts of social, practical, political, and professional life to live and find meaning within the parameters of the culture and worldview into which I was born. Behind the scenes, however, the gnawing awareness that an essential component of my identity was not being adequately incorporated into the picture continued to aggravate my resolve. In truth, I often felt more like an impersonator than a real person. Until one day, things didn't start out well that morning. My husband had dropped me off at school during one of those nonsensical newlyweds arguments. I was very upset by the discord. By the time I reached the door of my classroom, I found myself worked into a thick lather of funk. Stepping through the classroom door into the brightness of my students' eager anticipation, I was barely able to assume my role as their teacher, let alone feign the usual vibrancy and enthusiasm they had been accustomed to. The daily lesson began on schedule. I was a pro and had no trouble automatically taking my charges through the paces of an oral French class. Part of the drill consisted of modeling and repetition in unison of French vocabulary, phrasing, and pronunciation. A lyrical rhythm of ebb and flow ensued as the students' voices echoed in choral response the sequences of tone and sounds that I set forth. Before long, the entire room was filled with a joyful cadence that could be likened to that of a well-tuned orchestra playing in sync with their conductor. The shining faces of my teenage students let me know that all 33 of them were as aware as I that something truly extraordinary was occurring between us. Then, sharply and suddenly, the bell rang, and the class was over. I just had the best time of my life, and I wasn't even there, I exclaimed to a colleague in an effort to articulate the phenomenon that had transpired in my classroom. The dramatic shift of the before me, an ego-centered person in a funk, to the after me, a transcendent self-person, totally alive and exuberant, held a crucial lesson for me. It turned out to be a turning point from which there was no return. I became aware that the impersonator was no longer present in the teacher-student relationship that took form. I saw my new radiant self reflected in my students' beaming faces. Before my very eyes was the actual evidence of the identity that up until now I had only sensed as present. If not the impersonator, then, I asked myself, who was the real teacher in the classroom that day? The before person that entered her classroom that memorable day, many years ago, would not only have been unable to teach her class properly, but she could have done harm to her students had she not been willing to let go of her preoccupation with herself in order to do her job. In a similar way, in retrospect, it seems to me that ego-centered, separate human identities will not serve us well in the 21st century as we step together interdependently into the bright, uncertain future of the global village. My personal experience of a shift in identity from impersonator to real person, as I have attempted to describe it, may seem insignificant at face value. Nevertheless, the change in identity, because it was recognized and consciously articulated, I just had the best time of my life, and I wasn't even there, could possibly hold significance for educators. The awareness of the two I's, as articulated, may contain at least two important clues to the essential nature of the shift in consciousness. A, the letting go of a self-centered, self-preoccupied I, and B, the giving in to a loving I in relationship with others, especially others for whom one holds a sacred responsibility, such as the teacher-student relationship. Now, how a question of identity may translate into a doctoral dissertation and possibly into a transformed approach to education remains to be seen. Since real is not a concept and only concepts about reality can be taught, I'm left with a dilemma. The last thing I want to see in education is a new and improved course or methodology for teaching who I am, even if such an approach were to get past school officials and parents' committees. In all probability, a modern technique for teaching authentic identity or some other facsimile would not only be rejected outright by the powers that be, the results of such an unlikelihood would be disastrous, or more of the same. Only when things can be seen by many in a variety of aspects without changing their identity, so that those who are gathered around them know that they see sameness in utter diversity, can worldly reality truly and reliably appear. Hannah Arendt. I envision a world that is not artificially contrived or conceptually derived, but beautifully created by the loving thoughts, words, and actions of a people who know who they are. In such a loving space of in-between, I am fully confident that the healing of current rifts between people and nations can occur, diversity can flourish, and originality can bear the unprecedented. This is the world I have always imagined possible, but now I see that what I once only sensed to be true behind the scenes can become a practical, down-to-earth reality by reason of awakened and awakening human hearts and minds. Thank you.